me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Then the Lord said, there is a place near where you may stand on a rock. When the glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face may not be seen. May God add his blessing to his word, and may his name be praised this morning. Neill, I want to invite you to... Oh, okay. Turn the TV for Neill.
I've got to switch all these things on. I was trying to get the pointer to work earlier, and then it was pointed out to me that you've got to switch it on before the pointer will work. Right. Got it right. Okay. So I'm talking about water and sewerage. How's that for a spiritual message? But hopefully I can add more than just talking about water and sewerage, because I think what we do in our lives has a spiritual side as well as a physical side. So yeah, water and sanitation for poor communities. This better work. Why doesn't it want to go forward? And it is on. You try and make it go forward. Yeah, no, it didn't do it for me. Okay, they got something going at the back. Okay, so the first question, of course, is to say, so why are we here? What is our purpose? What did God put us on this earth for? And I know there's the Great Commission in Matthew 28 that says, go and make disciples of all men. But that's part of what this first verse here talks about, doing the good works which God prepared for us in advance to do. So God has a plan. That's what he says to me. I've got a plan for you. And I guess he's got a plan for all of you. And it was prepared way back then. Right? We were created in Jesus Christ. And of course, now I start wondering. And I think, okay, so the Lord created us. The Lord has a plan for us. It's interesting if you go and look in Genesis when the creation is described. And there are the 6 days. And on the 6th day, he creates animals. And then he creates man. In every other creation aspect, it's let us, let this, the world brings forth. And then it comes to us. And God says, let us make man. So it shows that Jesus was there, in my interpretation, at the beginning of time. Because it's not let me, it's let us. And then, of course, there's the famous John 1, where in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And in verse 14 it says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So Jesus himself is saying, I was there at the time of creation. So to me, that is a huge kind of almost burden placed on us to understand what is our purpose in life, which is what is our mission. Now, you think of missionaries, right? People going out and bringing people, leading people to Christ, but we all have a mission. It's that thing, it's that purpose that we have in life that we are committed to. Now, I'm talking to you what I've been doing for 45 years. That's how long I've been dealing with water and sanitation. And I believe that was my calling, to bring water and sanitation to people. And that in itself is a huge challenge, because it is a massive task. But we serve an amazing God. And that scripture that Michelle read from Exodus talks about Moses saying to God, I want to see your glory. And he says, can't be possible. Because God is so holy and so pure that if you were to see my face, you will die. So he takes him, puts him in the cleft, and puts his hand over him and passes by. And he takes his hand away when his back there. You can't see his face. He says, right now you can see me. And if you read on, that impact on Moses was so great that for a long time afterwards, he had to wear a veil, because that reflected glory of God impacted on him so much. And that says to me that that this God that we serve is not somebody that we can order out. If he says to you, you've got to do something, well, who am I to argue? But equally, that powerful, pure, holy God chooses to have a relationship with us. So as we live out this mission, I've sensed in my 45 years the presence of God, to the point that I've had personal assistants who call it an unfair advantage. Things have happened, and they say, that's not fair. In little things, people talk about paying for parking places and the car drives out as they get there. But the number of times that I've seen God's hand on the work, to the point that it's so obvious that you cannot deny it, and that other people have been able to see it. I hopefully say that humbly, because I can tell you that the things that we've done in this city, a lot of it is because of that word of knowledge or wisdom, whatever you want to call it, that empowering that comes from that relationship with God. And to me, that is an amazing thing about Christianity. We are not in a religion. We're not obeying a set of rules. We're in a relationship with a God who is so powerful that we can't look at him and is so holy. And yet he chooses to actually work with us through our lives so that we can achieve those purposes, that we can work out that mission that he has purposed for us. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be without trouble, and I've had my fair share of trouble in 45 years. You deal with 100 politicians, and you know what's going to come your way. And I take sort of solace, I guess, from the fact that people like Job, God allowed trouble to come into their lives, and they pushed through. So it's not like it's a bed of roses. So when you carry out your mission, expect trouble. But equally understand that as you execute your mission, that the Lord is with you. I'm also reminded of the fact that you are given that purpose and that blessing. But we are expected to be good stewards of what we are given. So if you're given, and Michelle spoke in the introduction about the talents that we have, if you are given a talent, I believe the Lord expects you to use it wisely. And there's that story Jesus told when he was in Jericho of that rich nobleman who went off to become the king. And he left 10 of his servants, what I think is the equivalent to about 3 months' wages. A lot of money. He said, okay, here are 3 months for you, 3 months for you. I'm going away. Put it to work, he said. Right? And what happened? One chap went and buried it because he was scared of his master. Michelle, I've just knocked all your papers down. And when the ruler came back, when the king came back, he gave him what he had back. And others put it to work and increased it and gave it back. And Jesus says, well, the guy that did nothing, he wasn't a good steward. He took the money away from him and he gave it to the guy that had everything. So again, it's saying to me, if you have this talent, you better jolly well use it, whatever it may be, because you stand to lose it if you don't use it. So I had all these kinds of pressures to do this. Now that saying, water is life, sanitation is dignity, has been around for a long time. But it says a lot about the work of providing water and sanitation. This is the current situation in the world when it comes to water. There are 1 billion people who do not have access to safe water. Now, they're not dead, so they're getting water, but the work that they have to do to get that water is enormous. And it mainly falls, that burden, on women and children. The average person that doesn't have a tap at their home, or where the tap is more than 200 meters away, is spending about 5 hours a day fetching and carrying water. You need about 50 liters a day to sustain basic life. That's washing, cooking, drinking. If you get 50 liters a day in a tropical climate like South Africa, you will get by. The average family in Durban uses close to 170 liters per person per day. But you only need 50 to survive. Right? If the water is not within 200 meters of your house, the average consumption is about 7 liters per person per day. Because you have to carry those tons of water every day. Those women spend hours back and forth carrying water. So the burden that is placed on people is enormous. Now, if you look there, the red are the people where less than 75% of the people have access to safe water. Now, that water it's water, but it's filthy. It needs to be filtered through some kind of muslin cloth that needs to be boiled. They have to make a fire, put the water in the fire, just to be able to drink it or cook with it. So you can see the kind of impact that it has. And if the water is impure and people drink it, then they get sick. And we've done research in Durban and other parts of the world that shows if you provide good sanitation and safe water to people, the rate of diarrheas and all those waterborne diseases drops like a rock. And again, so people don't have to spend a whole lot of time and money going to clinics to keep themselves healthy. And then you get stunting because so much of the infections in your body, the food you eat is needed to fight the infections that you don't grow. So you see lots of very short, malnourished people in older life. That is a sign of poor food, bad sanitation, bad water quality. So that's the water. And water is an easy thing to convince people to spend money in. Because we all know you can't live for more than 5 minutes without air, 5 days without water, 5 weeks without food. So I've experienced it where if the water's cut off after 1 day, people are getting hysterical. They put their crying babies on the phone and say, listen, I need water now. I've seen people shoot each other at tankers fighting for water in water crises. There's something in you that drives you to get that water because you know you need it to live. I have a fascination with water. It's in everything. It's in you. It's a solvent. If you're a chef and you know about freeze drying, water has some really incredible qualities. You can change water under low pressure from ice to steam instantly. So chefs have worked out now they can freeze food, put it in a vacuum, heat it up, and instantly the water disappears out of the food and you have dry food. And you would never know that food had been frozen. So that's how they can serve hundreds of people in a restaurant or in a function at one time. Can you read graphs? Let me try and show you how to read this one. So this is a graph that shows the temperature of the water, 50, going down to 0, which is when it freezes. And this here shows you the density. And what it's showing you, if you take a piece of metal and you cool it down, as you cool it down, it will shrink, right? Things get smaller. The colder you make them, the smaller they get. With water, the same thing happens. So if you have the same volume of metal and you shrink it, the density will go up, right? Because there's the same amount of stuff in a smaller space, so it's more dense. So water, as you cool it down, it gets more and more dense. When it gets to 4, it stops getting dense. And then when it gets to 0, it plummets down. Now, that is so clever. Because what it means is that the ice is less dense than the water that it's in. So what does ice do? Have you ever seen solid steel floating on liquid steel? You will never see that. It sinks like a rock. Right? So solid things in every other case are heavier than liquid things, but in water not. Because can you imagine if the water that we have in lakes and rivers froze right through? What will the fish do? What will the plants do? So the ice floats to the surface and life carries on underneath. I think that's really clever. Talk about our Creator being powerful, omnipotent, all those things. He even worked that out, right? There's no other substance that has those qualities. It is so essential for the sustenance of our planet. It is a solvent. It carries things. It is in every aspect of what we do. Sanitation is a different story. As you can see here, again, look at Africa in terms of sanitation. Less than 25% of those people have access to a toilet. Even in Durban today, after all the work that we've done, there is still 1% of the population that defecates in the open. Now you say 1%, that's small. But when you think there's 34 million people, that means 40,000 people every day don't have a toilet to go to in this very city that you live in. If you go into Africa, where I do a lot of work, all these red ones, into Asia, I work in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, there only 25% of the people have access. In India, 50% of the population to this day defecate in the open. Now, I've come out of hotels in Mumbai, in Chittagong, that's not in India, it's in Bangladesh, but in Chennai. I'm staying in this very fancy hotel because you don't want to stay in not a fancy hotel in India because this is a disaster. But you walk out of the door and they're sitting in the gutter are a whole lot of women lined up, doing their business with their sari out. They stand up, they shake themselves, and they go off. That's the reality of life. The ugly thing is the dogs then come and eat what is left behind. But that is the life that those people live every day. That's normal. 50% of the population. So we don't see that kind of thing here. We don't see open defecation, but it is happening. And so this question of sanitation being dignity is a very meaningful saying. Water is life, easy to understand. Sanitation being dignity, for us maybe not, but for the many people that live out there that don't have toilets, that is the situation. Now, when we started working as the Metro in Durban in 2000, there were 1 million people in the city out of the 3 million that were here then that did not have access to a proper toilet. And 1 million people that did not have access to piped water within 200 meters. So they were doing this, carrying water for hundreds of meters, 7 liters a day, surviving. And that was the challenge that I faced in Durban. Now today, since 2000 until now, we've connected because what's happened is the population has grown, but we've connected 1.5 million people to piped water and almost the same number to sanitation. So there's been a massive change in what has happened in Durban. That's what got us our recognition in the world, and that's what now got me working around the world, because people are saying, well, how on earth did you do that? And what happened, and what lessons did you learn? And we're now able to share them with other countries. Now, so these toilets are actually in Johannesburg, in Soweto. There are many people who move one up from open defecation and have this kind of toilet. Now, those toilets are not the safest toilets to use. In fact, if you look at this one here, you can see it's about to fall into the hole. And you often read of stories about people falling into toilets, babies drowning, that kind of thing. The interesting thing is in London, in 1905, the last outside toilet disappeared. So pit toilets were quite normal, even in London, until 1900. This idea that everybody had a flushing toilet forever. Flushing toilets were only invented in 1860. Before that, you went into the garden. My mother sits there and will tell you, she lived in Mount Etchcombe, which is there, not far away, right? Her toilet, when she was a young child, was outside. It was a pit toilet in the garden. And she used to have to go and fight the snakes and the bees, or go out in the dark. She didn't face what many of the poor women in this country face, the risk of being raped or attacked or robbed, going outside to the toilet. So this need for a toilet that's in the house that is safe is part of this whole question of restoring dignity. The other thing is that in us is something inherently that tells us sanitation is unclean. Now, unclean has a spiritual, biblical context as well. So here's a trick question for those of you that went to Sunday school. How many animals of each animal did Noah take into the ark? Do you remember your Sunday school songs? Right, what is it? You sure? Okay, so here's what the Bible says. The Lord said to Noah, go into the ark, you and your family, take with you 7 pairs of every clean animal. Clean animals are the ones with cloven hooves, cows and sheep and those kind of things, right? Right? Male and its mate. 2 of every kind of unclean animal, male and its mate, and 7 pairs of every kind of bird. Did you know that? Of course you all knew it, right? So 7 pairs of the clean, and I thought when I discovered this a long time ago, why would he want 7 of the clean ones? And then you read on and you find out why, because in those days, sanctification and restoring of relationship with God was through the offering of sacrifices, of clean animals. So he needed some extra ones to be able to offer his sacrifices. And when Noah hit the ground after the flood, the first thing he did was offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving, using the clean animals. So he didn't take 2 by 2, he took 7 by 7 of the clean ones and 2 by 2 of the unclean ones. So elephants, tough luck for them, only 2. But the cows and the rest, lots more. Now that clean and unclean is something that's in us. You have an aversion to sanitation. And that's because sanitation in its untreated state is not really very good for you. That was all changed by Jesus when he came and said, well, all food is clean, thankfully. So now you can eat things other than cows and lambs and whatever else you eat. There are 600 references, more than 600 references to water in the Bible. Right? But not for sanitation, sewers, and excrement. These 2 particularly appeal to me. The one is talking about open defecation. The Lord says, when you go out, relieve yourself, go and dig a hole and cover it up. which is what the people that do active defecation do. The second one really appeals to me. It shows God's compassion. Ezekiel was in exile in Babylon, I think it was, and God told him to tell the people what was going to happen to Jerusalem. He had to lie, I think, on his left side for 200 days, and then on his right side. And God said, you have to make this bread, very specific recipe. And look what he says over here. You must bake it using human excrement for fuel, and then you must eat it. And that will show the people the suffering that the people in Jerusalem are going to go through. Ezekiel said, Lord, no, can't do it, please. So God, showing his compassion, says, okay, you can use cow manure. Even the Lord can be convinced sometimes. As holy and mighty as he is, he will listen to us, and he's allowed to change his mind. So we have this thing that says excrement is a problem. Now that's a picture of Inanda. This here is Inanda Dam. It's a bit difficult, they're blurry, but there's a lot of houses there. Now in 2000, none of those houses had access to proper toilets, and none had access to piped water. They used these polluted rivers here, which were pretty heavily polluted, for their water source. Today, that area looks a lot different because there are a lot more people, but today everybody in that valley has access to piped water at their house and has a toilet at their house. They're part of the 1.5 million people that now have access to proper sanitation. And we've seen similar kinds of things as people have adopted these strategies across the world. Because it can be done. It just takes will. These kinds of toilets, urine diverting toilets, this is another message we've had to take to the world. We cannot afford to provide piped sewage to everybody. To do that for Durban, to connect the 250,000 families who are on these kinds of toilets to piped sewage would cost 65 billion rand. 65 billion rand. An enormous amount of money. It's just not affordable. You take that around the world, you're talking about hundreds of trillions of rand to provide piped sanitation. So we've started this debate in the world that says we've got to find another way to bring sanitation to people. In the dense shack settlements, this kind of technology is now being used more and more, where you provide containers. Inside those containers are showers, toilets, wash troughs. It then means that within 50 or 60 meters, those people in the shacks can walk to a toilet and have access to clean water. That's connected something like 600,000 people in southern Africa to sewage. Now, talk about putting your money to work, right? The parable of the nobleman. Here's a person who's put his money to work. Do you recognize this person? Not me, that guy. Right. Happens to be, I think he's just become the second richest man in the world, but until last week he was the richest man in the world. He has a foundation where he's put $32 billion into the foundation. His philosophy is that every life is of equal value. Exactly what the scriptures teach us. And he is investing, that's Bill Gates for those of you who don't know him. Right? He's investing $30 billion in education, health. And in 2009 he came to Durban. This is a picture of him standing out there in KwaMashu in Durban, to look at what we were doing, to say, so where can I invest money to improve the quality of life of people? And we were able to convince him that sanitation would make a huge difference. So Gates agreed to put something like $400 million. It's 5 billion rand into sanitation innovation. Now, that's not a small amount of money. Because the realization is that we need to see sanitation not as unclean, but as a resource, as a cycle. And the resources that are in sanitation to be able to recover them and reuse them. And to provide toilets that don't need water. Because 30% of the water that you use in your house flushes the toilet and goes to waste. It's a total waste of water. So if we can find a solution that means no water. In fact, my challenge to Gates remains, when you have a toilet in your house that needs no water, and that is as good as a flushing toilet, then we can say, even Bill Gates has a dry toilet in his house, and it works fine. And that's what he's spending his money on, in terms of sanitation. Now, here's part of the drama. This is the world population. Because think of this. So the world population today is 7.5 billion. It's just past 7.5 billion. I know it grows at 200,000 people a day. Every day there's 200,000 more people in the world. So there's 7.5 billion. So we're sitting somewhere over here, right? There's 6 billion, there's 8 billion. We're sitting there. So the population of the world has kind of taken off since 1950. Must I stop? No, a little bit longer. And that's the amount of arable land that's available in the world. What has happened to it? More and more land was being plowed, and since 2006, it's leveled off and now starting to fall. Because as the population is growing, cities are expanding. This area, when I was a small boy, was sugarcane. Now you've got a church here. Right? So where's the sugarcane? And that's happening all over the world. Everywhere I go, cities are expanding. The amount of farmland is reducing. So you've got less land producing crops and more people. And the other thing is that farmers, if you go to the States, you'll go to plains where it's called salt block. The land has been over-fertilized and now it is basically sterile. You can't grow anything in it. So the amount of farmland is getting less and less, and the population is growing. So what does that mean? That the amount of land per person since 1960 to 2060 has halved. So we're feeding people on half the land per person that we had before, which means we've got to increase the productivity of the land. And the only way you can do that is with fertilizer. And what is in fertilizer? Phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen. And what happens? You grow the crops, you eat them, and the cows eat them. And excuse my English in the church, but you pee that into the toilet, and it goes to the sewage works, and where does it end up? In the sea. That phosphorus, which is essential for photosynthesis, is being depleted. Next picture. This is a graph showing the amount of phosphorus in the world. So this red here is the rock in Morocco, Canada, places like that. It's a finite amount of phosphorus. When it's finished, it's finished. Then we can't have fertilizer anymore. You get manure, the yellow, and you get the crops that are plowed back into the land. This is the demand for phosphorus. If we carry on as we are, that's what's going to happen into the future. If we eat differently, less meat, right? Because meat takes up a lot of stuff that requires plants, we'll reduce the demand. If we get more efficient, because you know that something between 30 and 40% of the food that is produced ends up in a rubbish dump, because it's just thrown away. So we can get more efficient, we'll drop it to that. So look what's happening there. That's how much fertilizer we need, and this is how much fertilizer we've got. So we're seeing, now people argue about where this peak is. Is it 20, 25? Some say it's only in 200 years' time. But we need to recover the phosphorus. So Gates and the rest of us are spending our time now trying to find a toilet that needs no water, because water is a finite resource, and ways of recovering the nutrients. Now, thankfully, we've started this journey. So there are a number of projects. Durban has become Gates' test facility for all these innovations. This is one at Isipingo. That is a massive reef. It processes 36 tons a day of pit toilet sludge. And what we do is we take it and we feed it to black soldier fly larvae. And we grow them nice and fat. That fat. They are rich in protein. They are perfect. We haven't managed to convince people, this unclean thing keeps coming up, that stuff is safe for human consumption. But the protein that's in there and the biomass is used in animal feeds and a whole lot of other things. The oils that are in there are actually fantastic for ladies' moisturizers and things. But ladies seem to have an aversion to thinking that where it came from, what those black soldier fly larvae ate. But we'll get there one day. Right? I'm amazed at what happened at Belito. I've been trying to convince the city for 10 years to recycle sewage. Sewage water is cleaner than seawater. In fact, the rivers in Durban, when we discharge the treated sewage into the river, we improve the quality of the river. It is cleaner than the river. You're happy to take river water and purify it and drink it, but you don't want to take treated sewage water and drink it. I've drunk it. Nothing wrong with it. Belito had a water crisis. What did they do? They built a recycling plant. Those people are living happily. They're drinking recycled sewage. No problem. Nobody's getting sick. It's science, it's chemistry, it's biology, but your brain is messing you up big time. Right, on we go. Sorry, this thing is very stubborn. Here's another plant. This plant takes other pit toilet sludges. You put it in the one end of this machine. There's all the junk going in. And out the other side comes pellets, fertilizer pellets. Absolutely pathogen-free. The pathologists tell us there's nothing in those pellets that will harm people. if you feed that, you use that as a fertilizer for vegetables, and we've done trials. Cabbages that grow in pure water, after a month, are 2 little leaves like this. Got my fingers the right way, right? If you feed them with fertilizer, the cabbages are about that big. You feed them with this stuff, the cabbages are this big. There's a mixture of the carbon and the organics and the fertilizer in there that is magical. We still don't understand why. The agricultural people cannot tell us why. So what I'm trying to show you is that there's a lot of work going into seeing what we call this cycle, right? The circular economy of sanitation. One more. I'm getting to the end. This is in the basement of the customer services center in town. But this is a replica in Zurich. I took this from there. This is a nitrifier. That column, that brown column there, the sewage comes into this thing, and you put it through and it fixes the nitrogen into that brown liquid. Fantastic fertilizer. That one at the back there, and this dehydrator here, recover the phosphorus from the sewage. I didn't bring it there. I've got a bottle of phosphorus that comes from the urine of my staff in the building in town when I worked there. I used to put it on my table and say, "What's that?" I'd say, "That's from your urine," and they'd run out the office. Where did you get it? Well, it comes because we recover all the urine from the toilet. So we have systems in place now which process tens of thousands of liters of urine every day to recover the phosphorus. In Japan, where I've been a lot, they're doing it at scale. And that is the way of the future. That in bringing these services and meeting these needs of the women that have to spend 5 hours a day carrying water and whose children get sick, we will do it in a way that is more sustainable, that will return the nutrients. There's a lot of energy in sewage. I didn't show you all the energy ones. So that in the future we will have a more sustainable world. And we will be wise custodians of our resources, as was the case with the people that took the money that the noblemen gave them and grew it. Now, of course, how do you measure success? By what people do. Now, unfortunately, this thing is not cycling. I wonder why it's not cycling. It should cycle through, because that's the end picture. Can you try and do it can you take it back? I don't know why it's not cycling on your computer. Can you just do P? Just press P and see what it does? Oh, is that what it is? It's a pity. Because what I've got is a series of pictures that show that area, for example. Now you've got to use your imagination. In 2008, that area had 3 houses in it. It's a sugarcane field with 3 houses. In 2011, about half that area has houses. That's 2013. So in 5 years, that went from a sugarcane field to that. Just because we provided water and sanitation in that area. And that's what's caused this massive movement of people towards Durban. Politicians have said we're a victim of our own success. So Durban's grown from 3 million to nearly 4 million in 17 years. Huge growth. Because people have come here realizing that they may get a job, but also that there's water and sanitation available. So this next one won't work either, which shows, if I can tell you, there were some shacks here next to that river. See that river there? This whole area here was empty, and that whole area there was empty. And in 5 years, just providing water, people moved in at an enormous rate to make use of the services. Because now the water's right there, toilets are there, their quality of life improves. So to end, I ask myself questions. Am I doing what God prepared me in advance to do? Have I really heard His word for me, and am I doing it? And the other thing is that am I doing it in a way that keeps God involved? And to me, that is the most amazing thing about Christianity, as I said at the beginning. The fact that I can live my life as holy as God is, as omnipotent as He is. He's interested in me, that I can share the happy and the sad of every day. He talked about the flowers, and I mean, that resonates with me so much. You know, get up in the morning and look up and see the moon and the stars and think, God, you made those things. I mean, if you understand how complex those suns are and those planets are, and how many billions of stars there are, it just speaks to me about the majesty of God. And yet He wants to have a relationship with me. He wants to carry out His purpose that He ordained when He created the world, that He knew. There's this MacLeod coming along. That's what I want him to do. Right? There's Michelle coming along. That's what I want you to do. And if we live it in that attitude, recognizing we will have problems, I think our lives will be so much more fulfilling. So that, at my late age, is my challenge for myself and I guess for you. Thanks very much. I'm sorry about that.
No,